Up from the Gates, a story of divine dealing through Dunkirk by Captain H.E. Beresford Mash. Chapter 9, Afterward. On Sunday, I received permission to be taken home by my family, who had brought 2 cars down and, what was a most welcome sight, some clothes. When I came off the boat, I only had on a borrowed shirt and greatcoat and a pair of socks on my feet. I had nothing of my own left. We arrived home in the evening, and before getting to bed, I asked those who had come to fetch me to join in praise to the Lord for a safe return. As I prayed, my soul took up the only verse which seemed adequate. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I prayed that God would use the testimony of that day to the upbuilding of each one of us gathered there. I scarcely realized then that he was going to use it to a much wider circle. Later that evening, when we were alone again for the first time, my wife and I read Daily Light together. We found the chief text at the head of the passage appointed for that evening was the same verse from the 23rd Psalm. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I wonder, too, if it was only coincidence that in a letter returned to me a day or two later with a batch that had not reached me in France, I found some verses sent me by someone in my Bible class. On the back of these verses, there was a quotation, not really intended for my reading, but which just happened to be printed on the reverse. If I were asked for a text for a young Christian, said the writer, I should answer, the Lord is my shepherd, and if I were asked for a text for an aged saint, I should say, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And remember, in what they call the New Testament, Lord is usually not an actual translation of what they're saying. But if I were further pressed for a word for a Christian facing the vicissitudes of life, meeting with trials, conflicts, sorrows, disappointments, and even death itself, I would say, take all that lies between the first and last sentences of Psalm 23, but especially dwell upon its central statement, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Some people would say that the mention of the magical tools in that passage are the most important focus. My friend sent me the cutting with the idea that the verses on the other side might be of interest and help, but the Lord's message was in the fragment underneath. During the weeks in bed that followed, I had time to reflect on all that had happened. God had indeed given me a testimony. That fact emerged clearly from all. Moreover, it was a striking testimony to his power and reality, and for that reason I have felt compelled to release it even more widely in these pages. It has been a privilege to release a part of the testimony already, either by lip or through such channels as the magazine of the Officers Christian Union, Practical Christianity. God has shown himself in complete control of all circumstances, guiding our lives to a perfect pattern, which nothing could hinder. To the Christian, even the shadow of death may melt away at the nearness of Christ, and nothing may touch the one who rests in the hollow of his hand. That is not all. To those who are privileged to prove God in these ways, there is given not only that exhilaration of faith triumphant, but a precious something added to the soul's possessions, not just a memory or an experience of the intimate nearness of a powerful presence, but a revelation to the soul of the reality of Christ, or revelation of the thinness of the veil existing between faith and sight, between the earthly and the eternal. Someone has said, we enter into the presence of God not through death, but through faith. It is very true. To me, this experience has been something which, while it can never be adequately described or explained, will always remain. It will make life different, and death too, that must have a different approach. Now I know how near he can be there. Reflecting on the memory of Christ's intense nearness in the water at Dunkirk, I have come to understand a little of the deeper meaning of a certain rendering of the last verse of Psalm 48. This God is our God forever and ever, and he will be our guide even unto death. Now, part of the reason of using Lord so much is to get people to connect the ambiguous term Lord in the New Testament as Jesus with the Old Testament. The literal rendering of this last phrase requires the word over to be in the place of the word onto. He will be our guide even over death. This word is far more adequate, gloriously complete. It implies that his guiding hand will be upon us right into the beyond, not that it may be supposed to be to continue with us until death only. He is gloriously all-sufficient to make death only an incident along the path so that we shall no longer anticipate it as the climax. Well, it could be as the climax of deeds, as the end of Surah 15 in the Quran indicates, that until you have that certainty of death, that you keep on worshiping. You keep going. There is something deeper still beyond all this. I hesitate here, not just from any fear of being misunderstood, but knowing my powers of expression seem so inadequate rightly to speak on these deeper things. Yet, if my testimony is to be in any way complete, I feel it must include some expression of a yet further factor in these experiences. The 25th Psalm contains a well-known promise: the secret of the Lord is with them that fear him. One difference with the Quran is there's more of a focus on regard of God, regard of the situation, than the aspect of fear. Of course, fear, hope, love, and hate are definitely things of any sound or even semi-sound spiritual path. Another rendering of this is, the counsel or mind of the Lord is with them. I have realized with deep awe and reverence that at the beginning of these incidents, God deliberately revealed a measure of his mind and plan to me, and the promises were a revelation in advance of what he purposed to do. His secret counsel, deep and unknown, was made available to his servant. If I read the passage aright, he waits to do this for each of his children. Children in the Gnostic sense, right? Because the Bible talks about how people can choose to be what they call children of God or children of the devil. And that there are many of each. To have such a revelation is not the extravagant claim of an isolated individual, but is a part of the birthright of all believers. The significance and challenge of this is deep with me today, and I would pass it on both in our spiritual experience and in our Christian service. The power of this principle is needed. The future in our lives invariably appears uncertain, but it is not so to God. He knows the plan in its entirety and how amazing it is. He is actually willing to reveal that plan, his secret counsel, to the waiting soul who will seek it. How simple then the pathway becomes. If it be some service for God which occupies us instead of rushing in with our plans and ideas, we may receive from him a revelation of his plans, and putting them into effect makes all the difference. His plans are certain of fruitfulness. They cannot fail or miss the mark. There is a deep, deep confidence given to the soul who knows God's will revealed, a confidence that can withstand all outward assault and contrary circumstance. To me, this transforms all the activity we speak of as Christian work. This is not meant to be just a schedule of meetings and services interspersed with the measure of prayer, however helpful all that may seem to be. The complete fruitfulness of any effort is not in any plan of our making, our organization, however fervent or zealous the workers. The complete plan, the purpose of any fruitful ministry or spiritual activity, such as a meeting, is born in prayer. It is conceived in the mind of God and is, first, the secret of the Lord, but the promise assures us that it is with them that fear him. Therefore, it is our primal responsibility to wait on him for a distinct revelation of his plan for any meeting or any message before we dare to arrange it or go forth. Having once received that revelation, however, we can go forth utterly confident that the battle is already won, because the plan of operation now is of his design and is certain of success. All further prayer effort is then a concentration of praise for the coming victory and blessing which has been first conceived and planned in the mind of God. The victory is won before a meeting or a message on our knees, and lies in an apprehension of the fact that a clear transmission of God's plans and desires to us is vital, and in our being satisfied with nothing less before we dare to go forth to exercise any spiritual ministry. And of course, in Psalm 23, the rod and the staff, the cup and the table, and of course the oil represents the Spirit.